where the Alberta Premier is now
A
speaking.
bill that gives Albertans the power to maximize the value that we get from the resources that we own here in the province. At its root, that's what our fight as well to build the Trans Mountain Pipeline is all about. Getting top dollar for our resources so we can invest in a better Alberta. With pipeline capacity stretched to the limit, Albertans have the right to choose how our energy is shipped so that Alberta gets the best return possible. Bill 12 gives us that power. With the price differential on our oil taking billions of dollars out of our economy, Alberta has the right to act in the public interest to reduce the cost to the Treasury and the economy. Bill 12 gives us that power. And with the BC government seeking to limit what energy products can flow across provincial borders, Alberta has the right to make that decision for ourselves. Bill 12 gives us that power. It is a tool in our toolbox to help get the job done. Earlier today, as well, the federal government took an important step on that matter. In announcing that Ottawa will fully backstop the project, the federal government has worked with Alberta to eliminate the financial risk to the project brought by the actions of the BC government, a key piece of our overall strategy. From the beginning, pipeline opponents have sought to exhaust investors into submission by throwing up legal roadblocks. That strategy doesn't work if the project is backed by the Canadian people. It's also important that BC's effort to claim legal authority to limit the shipment of energy products over its borders are overruled or dropped. BC does not have this authority. The Constitution is clear. It's simply a transparent attempt to kill the pipeline and hurt Alberta's economy and, quite frankly, that of large parts of BC, by sowing as much legal confusion and uncertainty as possible. I'm not prepared to let that happen. We are working closely with the federal government to provide legal certainty to investors. Those discussions are happening every day, and I am confident solutions will be found that allow for construction to resume on schedule this summer. At the same time, as of the end of the day, Alberta will be equipped, or as the end of the day today, Alberta will be equipped with new tools to assert our rights to control the flow of our resources to British Columbia. Albertans, British Columbians, and all Canadians should understand that if the path forward for the pipeline through BC is not settled soon, I am ready and prepared to turn off the taps. So I'm happy to take your questions.
There's this, the message from Notley seemed more like a message for Kinder Morgan, because he also said that if we can't cut a deal with Kinder Morgan, we'll go someplace else. Is Kinder Morgan sort of making demands that in terms of this pipeline that your two governments just can't meet?
I think that's going a bit farther than is necessary, and I'm certainly not going to engage in negotiations in public. But I think that what we saw today very clearly is that at the very least, what the federal government has indicated is that they are prepared to follow up their conviction that they have the jurisdictional authority to remove the legal uncertainty with a backstop, and a backstop that will actually travel from investor to investor, if necessary.
Well, once again, it's all carrot, no stick. It's all, John Horgan is unconstitutional. He's going against the best interests of the country, and yet, once again, there's no indication from the federal government that they will do anything in terms of a punitive nature for BC. Instead, we'll just do the carrot, we'll try and buy this. Mm-hmm. I think Amarjeet Sohi had a tweet yesterday saying, if you penalize BC, you're penalizing kids out there. Like, the whole message from Ottawa is that we are not going to penalize BC. Do you share that, and are you prepared to be the only one carrying the stick on it?
Well, there are a number of different leverage points in what is a very complex negotiation, a complex strategy to get a fundamentally important piece of infrastructure to the country of Canada built. For my part, we have a number of, we are doing what we can do. And today, one of those elements of what we can do will pass through the legislature in the form of Bill 12. So that is what we will do. Meanwhile, I'm in day-to-day contact with the federal minister about the work and the conversations that are going on there to get to a point where the jurisdictional uncertainty and the financial uncertainty is removed and construction resumes on schedule this summer.
So
when it comes down to pulling the trigger on Bill 12, you spell out the actual steps. You're going to wait until after the May 31st deadline and the pipeline is done, and KM pulls out, or are you going to do something before May 31st?
With the greatest of respect, I am absolutely not going to spell out the exact schedule or the exact steps, because that's not helpful right now for a variety of reasons. What we will do is after it passes the House today, we will be ready and able to move forward with very short notice as needed. And that is exactly the position that we want to be in.
When exactly will the regulations be in place for you to act on this?
Again, similar question to what Graham was asking. There is a process. Obviously, the matter needs to be proclaimed. We need to pass the regulations. We need to consult with the affected players within industry, because, of course, we're very clear that we wouldn't be taking industry by surprise. But the particular timeline for that is not something that we're going to lay out at this point.
How do you react to a tweet from Jagmeet Singh from about 45 minutes ago? Suggesting that it's clear this pipeline should not be built, calling the process a rigged process, First Nations and local communities shut out, oil spill threats, science ignored, and now billions on the line that the Liberals are giving Kinder Morgan a blank check while dumping all the risks on Canadians.
I think Jagmeet Singh is absolutely fundamentally, uncontrovertibly incorrect in every element of that tweet.
How is that making your life right now?
Actually, it's not really a big part of my day-to-day considerations on the work that we need to do to get this pipeline built and to get construction resumed on schedule, in June.
When it comes to the actual, Phil Morneau said this morning, are you on side with his comments regarding the backstopping the project? You talked about willing to indemnify this against unnecessary delays that are politically motivated.
I think at the end of the day, what we know is that there are very extensive conversations going on, and elements of those conversations are becoming public, but not all of those conversations. There's no question that what we know is at the very least, the federal government is prepared to remove the financial risk, and they are prepared to backstop their assertion that they have the legal jurisdiction to remove the legal risk with the backstop. But to suggest that that's all there is to the conversation is probably not complete either.
Where is Alberta in this then?
Well, we are speaking with I'm speaking with the finance minister on a daily basis. Our officials are at the table, engaging very actively in the due diligence, and so we are working very closely with them, and we are looking at ensuring that we have different frameworks in place. If framework 1 doesn't work, there may well be a framework 2, because we're making sure that we're right on it. But that's all I can say at this point.
You said, if necessary, you were willing to buy the whole thing outright, $7.4 billion. But that's still something you're looking at.
What I will say at this point is that on a day-to-day basis, we are talking with the federal government, and without getting into the details of negotiations, we will do whatever is necessary to make sure, A, that the pipeline construction on the pipeline resumes this summer on schedule, and that what is done reflects the best use of resources to best represent the people of Alberta, both from a fiscal perspective as well as from an economic perspective.
Isn't this just sort of the easy way out, though, Premier? I mean, it's your job, it's the federal government's job to get this pipeline built through BC, but instead you're just going to buy your way out of it using taxpayers' dollars. Why don't you use the levers of power, or the federal government use levers of power that it has to get this thing built?
Well, we are using pretty much every lever that we can to influence opinion in BC, which jurisdictionally, this is the thing that we can do. We don't actually, the government of Alberta doesn't have that ability. And at the end of the day, I think that we are making progress in terms of public opinion in BC. But I'm not going to dig in publicly about what tools the federal government is ultimately prepared to use at this point, because that is part of the conversations and the negotiations. Yeah, that's what I'll say at this point.
We're going to go to the phone lines now. Operator, please put through the first caller.
Our first question
question comes from Chris Varco of the Calgary Herald. Your line is open.
Chris, do you have a question? Operator, can you put through the next caller?
Our next question comes from Jeffrey Morgan of the Financial Post. Your line is open.
Hi, Premier. Thanks for taking my question. Specifically with respect to being able to cut off taps in short order, or cut off the flow of resources in short order, how quickly does this bill allow you to move? Like, what is the process you would need to follow? Do you need to get, I guess, consent from these shippers? Could it be done in a matter of days or a matter of hours?
Generally speaking, what needs to happen is the bill has to be proclaimed, the regulations need to be passed, the licenses need to be issued, and the conversation with the shippers need to occur.
Do you have a follow-up, Jeff?
Yeah, so I realize the bill is being passed today. What I'm curious about is whether or not there are other legislative steps or regulatory steps that need to be put in place before you can start to use it.
As I say, yes, the bill needs to be proclaimed. The regulations need to be passed by cabinet. The licenses need to be issued, and we have to have conversations with those who would be impacted by the licenses.
Operator, please put through the next caller.
Our next question comes from Tony Sessis of the CBC. Your line is open.
Hi, Premier. Just back to, I think it was Graves' question about Alberta building the pipeline itself. I just want to be clear. This is something then that is still on the table. And is it your understanding that the indemnity that the federal government would provide would extend to Alberta if that were the scenario?
I think it's pretty clear today that the federal government would be prepared to extend the indemnity to any buyer that came along, if that was the situation that we ended up in.
Do you have a follow-up, Tony?
Well, yeah, and just so, and again, I just want to be clear. So that is an option for the province to build it on its own, to go its own on this project?
We've been always very clear that we would do whatever was necessary to get this pipeline built. And at this point, as I say, we're engaged in the conversations that are going on between Kinder Morgan and the federal government. When there is more detail that we want to, that is in everyone's best interest for us to disclose, then we'll do that then.
Operator, please put through the next caller.
Our next question comes from Maura Forrest of the National Post. Your line is open.
Yes, hi, Premier. I'm wondering another question on federal NDP leader Jagmeet Singh's tweet from earlier. I'm just wondering how close you feel your party is to the federal NDP at this point.
Well, as I've said before, on this point, I think we disagree.
So right now we're watching Alberta Premier Rachel Notley take questions regarding the federal government's announcement today that it will offer indemnity, which is essentially financial protection to Kinder Morgan to make sure the Trans Mountain pipeline goes through. Some major developments today in the pipeline standoff in Western Canada. Alberta's Premier saying she is pleased with the federal government's move, also indicating that her government will be moving forward with passing Bill 12. That is a bill that will essentially allow the government to retaliate against BC and restrict oil and gas shipments to British Columbia. So right now we are seeing this standoff over the Trans Mountain pipeline, but the Premier is saying the federal government has offered legal certainty. She is confident that this pipeline will be constructed, or that construction will begin this June. At this point, we don't know what BC Premier John Horgan will say about all of this and whether he will allow the pipeline to go forward. But at this point, the federal government is offering that financial backing to Kinder Morgan or any other company that wants to take on this project to see it built, so that resources can be shipped through the Pacific Ocean and to new countries. So a lot of developments there. We're going to continue to track all of the reaction across Canada.